They thought that he was an ordinary orphan, but in the end he saves an incredibly strong vampire and becomes his master. Mahiru lost his mother at an early age. It seemed that the burden of losing his only parent was too heavy for his children's shoulders, but he heard his relatives whispering about who would now take care of this orphan. Mahiru felt that loneliness would consume him after the death of his mother, but then suddenly his uncle offered to take him in. He put his hand on the boy's head and said that since they were relatives, he should accept him now. Mahiru studies in high school and believes that in life you need to do everything simply and logically. Just like his uncle, he doesn't expect someone to come and do something for him, but takes the initiative into his own hands and does everything himself. One day he finds a wounded cat on the street, brings it home, nurses it, and decides to keep it for himself. He names the sleepy black kitten Kira, not suspecting that there is something dark and sinister in him. The next day, when he returns home, his friends tell him rumors that vampires have appeared near the railway station and that 10 people have already been killed by them. Mahiru does not believe these rumors and returns home, but to his surprise he sees that the TV on he let Nan saw a strange Guyama with dark circles under his eyes to set comfortably Nikova and asked who he was and how the hell he got into his house. He tried to hit the intruder with a broom that the Guyama was too fast and easily dodged, but when Mahiru is about to attack the second time he accidentally pulls back the curtain and lets in some light. As soon as the sun's rays hit the stranger, he suddenly turns into a black cat. Mahiru is perplexed by such an unexpected turn of events, and as soon as he pulls the curtain back the cat becomes human again. He asks who he is and the guy replies that he is just a kind vampire. The recluse Mahiru panics when he realizes that his friends were right and tries to drive the vampire out into the sun. Mahiru accuses him of attacking people's station, but the lazy vampire Amor replies that he doesn't even know what he is talking about. Mahiru is still trying to understand what's happening when the vampire asks him not to call him by name. While he's in human form, Mahiru asks what will happen if he calls him Kuro, and suddenly blue circles appear on his wrist and neck. Another energy circle is formed on the ground, and when it dissipates the circles shrink and disappear. Kuro is depressed. He's already tired of it, but Mahiru shakes him to explain what happened. The lazy vampire says that he belongs to a special type of vampires who are connected with their master. They can drink blood only from their master, and the master's orders are the law of Kuro for them. Explains that what happened in our was a temporary contract and it will be cancelled if Mahiru does not give him his blood within 24 hours. This is good news for Mahiru, and he kicks Kuro out of the house to avoid problems. But when he enters the house he is drawn back to Kuro, which explains that they cannot go far from each other because of the contract. Mahiru has no choice but to take him with him. Although neither of them is happy with this situation, in a few minutes, he decides to meet with his friends and takes Kuro with him to tell them that the cat who is with him is a vampire. His friends think that he is too tired, and one of them gives him the number of his psychiatrist while Mahiru thinks how to convince them. He notices a dark threatening shadow in the mirror, and then a street magician, one of his friends, suddenly appears in front of his friends. Mahiru ignores him and leaves, but the magician stops him and suddenly bites him on the shoulder, spattering blood everywhere. Everyone runs away from the scene, and the magician climbs up a high pole and says that he's a vampire named Belchin. Knows that Mahiru picked up a black cat of a vampire and challenges him to a duel while Belchin is cozying around. Kuro suddenly gives him an unexpected blow. Mahiru asks him to explain what is happening, but Kuro says that they need to run because he doesn't want to fight a vampire. Mahiru doesn't like this and he tells Kuro to run away alone, and he returns to help the squirrel's friends attack them. But Mahiru jumps on him and grabs the squirrel's head with all his might, laughs at his attempts and attacks with a sword, but Kuro saves Mahiru. Taking the blow on himself, he throws Mahiru and the vampire aside and pulls the sword out of his chest. He says that he hasn't drunk blood for 100 years, so now it's too much weak to defeat. The squirrel suddenly puts his hand in Kuro's mouth and tells him to drink his blood. Kuro licks the blood dripping from his mouth, and the temporary contract between them becomes permanent. A collar appears on Kuro's neck connected by a chain to Mahiru's wrist. The vampire Emma receives enormous power and recognizes Mahiru as his new master. He becomes his vampire servant, or more simply put, Mahiru's servant orders him to defeat the evil vampire, and Kuro obeys. He creates a gust of wind by swinging his claws and directs it towards the squirrel, rushes at him, and kills him with one precise blow. Then Kuro lifts the wounded squirrel, But Mahiru suddenly pulls the chain and says that this is enough. The squirrel eats them and then puts on his hat and suddenly turns into a doll. Mahiru picks him up and asks why he tried to kill Kuro. He replies that it was an order from his master in Tsubaki, and Kuro says that he doesn't even know this little bastard little squirrel doesn't know Tsubaki, so he wants to kill everyone who doesn't know him. Suddenly the chain connecting Mahiru and Kuro disappears and they both fall to the ground from fatigue. When Mahiru opens his eyes, he finds himself in his room, and Kuro sleeps peacefully on his small bed. He immediately runs to school worrying about his injured friend. But to his surprise, he discovers that he is fine. In addition, he claims that the police told him that he was in a car accident, but he is almost nothing. Neither the injured friend nor the witness remembers that they saw Mahiru at the market, or something connected with the street magician vampire. Mahiru thinks that something is wrong here, and when he returns home asks Kuro if he knows anything about the Tsubaki squirrel. Suddenly starts raining, although there is not a cloud in the sky, and Mahiru finds himself in a strange dimension. Suddenly a crazy guy dressed like Aza's Bleach appears and starts laughing at Mahiru. The next second he quietly opens Mahiru's bag and takes out Tsubaki with a squirrel, and Mahiru, in a panic, realizes that he has encountered a dangerous enemy. Tsubaki approaches him, grabs Kuro and throws him aside, forcing him to turn into a human. Tsubaki calls his older brother, and when Mahiru asks Kuro if it's true, Kuro says that he has never seen this crazy guy before. Tsubaki laughs again, calling him cruel for not knowing him. Then he says that there are 7 real vampires who can enter into contracts with people and become their servants. They are all brothers and sisters based on the 7 deadly sins and Kuro to the forms of captivity. Tsubaki's older brother says that there is another real vampire. He himself is the forms of melancholy, the youngest of the 7 brothers, but no one accepts him. Mahiru becomes more and more confused. But then Tsubaki turns into a black fox and jumps on his shoulder to tease Kuro. Mahiru stops him to ask if he set the squirrel on yesterday, and Tsubaki confirms this by saying that he likes to kill people and vampires. Then he suddenly kicks Kuro and red petals fall from his sleeve, taking the form of a sword. Tsubaki attacks Kuro with a sword, but he blocks the blow with his dark claws. Mahiru asks Kuro to drink his blood to get some energy, but he refuses, and Tsubaki knocks him down, and Tsubaki steps on him through the war aside by all the vampires. Because it's fun, Mahiru realizes that he is mentally ill and he really needs a psychiatrist because he doesn't understand what they are telling him. He remembers a moment from the past when he was still recovering from the death of his mother, and although everyone was kind to him, he could not relax. Then his uncle told him to name his feelings and confront them because it was the only way to resolve the situation. Now Mahiru says the same thing to Tsubaki. He promises to give him blood and a name to make him his servant and then stop him from fighting with other vampires. Tsubaki laughs at and says that he will die before this happens. He swings his sword at Mahiru and Kuro rushes to save his life. Tsubaki does not have time to strike as they disappear, and he leaves thinking that Mahiru is an interesting guy. Meanwhile, Mahiru learns from Kuro that another king has just saved them. Suddenly 2 twins appear and announce that their master wants to see Mahiru, and his servant Kuro does not want to go, so he turns into Koda. But then a rich guy sitting on a throne appears and tells Mahiru that he has no choice but to go with him. They get into his limousine, and the guy introduces himself as Mizo, Lord of the Surgamp of Lust. They soon arrive at Mison's house, and the butterfly sitting on his head turns out to be a Survamp. Misona hits the Survamp on the head before introducing him as Snow, and then leads the guests inside. When they enter a closed room, they reveal their true intentions. Snow turns back into a butterfly and sucks the blood from Mison to summon the death side and release all his power. Mizo's attitude suddenly changes. Mizo orders Snow to attack them. They too dodges his first attack, and Mahiru asks Mison why the hell is he doing this. The rich guy refuses to explain anything to just a human, and this pisses off Mahiru. He takes Kuro in his arms and leaves through the front door, telling Mizo that he doesn't want to talk to such arrogant rich people. However, leaving the building, Mahiru realizes that got lost. Suddenly he notices hundreds of children who show him creepy stares from the windows, and Snow appears behind him and explains that these are his minions whom he created to carry out his orders. Snow says that in the war against vampires, Tsubaki and his minions first destroy the weak minions. Soon Misen appears, out of breath from going down the stairs. He says that he does not want to use minions as chess pieces that can be sacrificed for his own safety and therefore wants to get more power to protect them. He tells Mahiru that if he does not have the determination to become the master of a servant, then it would be better for him to become his subordinate. Mahiru finally understands what is required of him and tells Misana that he will help him protect his children, Snow's children, but not as a servant. And as a friend, Misana agrees and asks if he is going to fight the Kuro bear. He explains that all masters can use weapons created with the help of the power of their Cervarix. This Mahiru returns home with his best friend, Sakuya, and they walk home. Mahiru feels some kind of disturbing presence behind him, but when he turns around he doesn't see anything. Sakuya teases him saying that it's a vampire and then asks if he's seen anything strange lately. Mahiru can't tell him that Kurova is a vampire, so she asks him to call right away if something strange happens to him. Sakuya thinks he's strange and runs home. The next day Mahiru comes to Misen to find out how to get a weapon that will protect him friends from any threat. Kuro tells him to close his eyes if he wants to get a weapon, and when Mahiru does this, he finds himself in a dark place in Kuro's mind. He sees a creepy cat who says that he is part of Kuro and is responsible for the strength of his owner. The cat brings Mahiru a bunch of gifts and asks him to choose one because he will not be able to return or change it. Then Mahiru chooses the simplest gift box so that it matches his philosophy. The next second it turns into a magic broom, and he ends up in Misen's living room. The broom circles around Mahiru and then turns into a tattoo on his wrist, and he wonders if he can fight with it. Kina tries to summon the broom to help him in the fight, but it doesn't work. Snow tells him that he needs to imagine his goal, then summoning the broom will be easier, and Mahiru immediately remembers his friends. He thinks of them as his family and tells Misen that one day he will introduce them to him. After a few days, Mahiru and his friends begin to worrying about Saku, who hasn't shown up for several days at school. Mahiru decides to come see him after school and takes with him several lunches in containers. He tells Kuro that he and Saku have been friends with her since elementary school, and then suddenly his memory starts to fail him. He forgets Sakuya's address and wonders if he came to his house. He quickly forgets everything connected with Sakuya, but suddenly he appears right in front of him and scares him. Mahiru asks why the hell is he skipping school. Kuro looks at him suspiciously. Sakuya explains that a few days ago he was attacked, and although he was saved since then, he is afraid to leave the house. Suddenly they hear a scream in the distance, and Sakuya grabs Mahiru by the hand and leads him through the alleys to an open place. Before Mahiru can ask what happened, Kuro and Kira suddenly find themselves tied by some kind of steel threads, and at that moment two swords almost touch Kuro's underwear. Stands on the roof of a building and jumps straight to Sakuya. Sakuya gets furious and yells at Mahiru for coming here even though he was warned that there are vampires here. It is only after this that Kira realizes that Sakuya is actually Tsubaki's henchman. Sakuya tells Mahiru to remember their past and the moments they spent together so that he understands that in his memories of childhood he is not there. He takes out knives and asks Mahiru to find out how many of his memories are real and how many are not. Sakura attacks Mahiru, but Kuro shields him with herself, taking a blow to himself. The squirrel eats necks and pierces Kuro with his swords. Mahiru can't believe that his best friend is a vampire, and Sakuya says that he wishes he weren't one. Sakuya says that he trusted him, but then he made the mistake of lying that Kuro is an ordinary cat. He almost cries, telling Mahiru that if he hadn't done this they would still be friends. Mahiru wants to get out of this troubles with the help of his Motma, but Kira refuses to drink his blood. He says that it is Cervarix, but since he has no determination, he will not get any power even if he drinks his blood right now. Mahiru feels helpless because he doesn't know what to do. But suddenly the threads connecting him break, and Misana appears and Snow White attacks Snow, and Masao decides to fight with Sakuya to save Mahiru, his first friend. Sakuya believes that he is so rich and arrogant guy like he can't do anything and orders Bell to attack him first, but as soon as Bell gets between Mizo and Sakuya, activates. Bell is completely paralyzed and sits on the execution chair, and then Snow just cuts right through him, destroying his mind. Misona tells Saku that it's a pity that they have to fight because Mahiru wanted to introduce them. Sakuya's attitude suddenly changes and he starts acting like he wants to be friends with Mahiru and Misona. This makes Misona lose his guard and break the connection with Snow. At this moment Bale who now controls the threads, attacks Snow and cuts off his leg. Meanwhile, Sakuya attacks Min with his own and inflicts serious wounds on him. Then he puts a knife to Mahiru and says that he always wanted to kill him and his friends even when they were having fun, because this is how he was created. He throws Mahiru to the ground and says that now he will kill all his friends, but suddenly a ghost of a girl appears behind Sakuya and stops him. She whispers that he wants to hurt others like he was her, and all his attention suddenly switches to Mahiru. By this time, Kairuilm also comes to his senses and tells Mahiru that they cannot fight in this state, so they must run, but Mahiru refuses and takes a step forward to stop Saku. He calls his broom and hits him with all his might, leaving a wound that does not stop bleeding. Mahiru suddenly feels that he no longer controls his weapon, and then Sakuya asks him to kill him. His confidence disappears and his broom turns into a cloud of energy. He does not understand what he is doing and loses his mind. He feels that his weapon is forcing him to kill his best friend, and he knows that if he does that he will cease to be human. Despite this terrible feeling, Mahiru cannot control himself and rushes at Saku again, striking. He wonders if this is the power that he wanted to use to protect his friends. Mahiru continues to strike Sakuya with a broom and then throws him towards the fence. Sakuya looks at him with a smirk and Mahiru hopes that this is the end of his sad life. On the other hand, Mahiru's negative emotions such as guilt and regret enter Kuro's mind. He rushes at Mahiru and bites him on the neck to drink his blood. The chain connecting them appears again, and Kuro suddenly uses his hidden ability. Darkness bursts out from his back and takes the form of a giant creepy when the cat is covered with pits all around, and Mahiru can only scream. What happens before he is swallowed up by this liquid? Sakola holds out his hand and asks him to order his servant to kill him, and then everything will be decided. He tells Mahiru that he lied to him before because he wanted to die at his hands, but now the situation is becoming too complicated. However, before Mahira can make a decision, the bullet hits Kurov of the heart and his dark forces disappear. Another Servam and his master have reached the battlefield. The master orders his Seer Wampa deals with everyone, and he jumps down, kicks Kuro and shoots him until he turns into a Servamp cat with a brown paper bag instead of his head. He rushes at Sakuya and shoots him, but at the last moment he is saved by his friend Puppeteer. She orders him to retreat, and he obeys. Mahiru asks him if he really wanted to kill him before, but Sakuya just throws him his bracelet and disappears. Soon a car arrives at the place and Snow's minions come there. He tells them that Mine is not seriously injured and immediately takes him to hospital. Mahiru feels guilty that Misona was injured, but then the vampire cowboy appears and says that Misona should take responsibility for the fact that he lost his vigilance in battle. He introduces himself as a traveling antiques dealer vampire named Jed Servamp of Anvi, and he is a strange type who talks to dolls and deliberately mocks his sermon. The fight hands over Kuro to Mahiru. Apologizing for treating him so rudely, he says that it would be better if he figured it out from Sakuya. 2. He tells Mahiru that it's good that he realized in time that he doesn't have enough determination to kill someone. He offers to take Kuro and return him to normal life because the path of the Servamp master is not for those weak like him. He tells Mahiru to contact him if he wants to break the contract with Kuro and leaves the next day. When Mahiru went out to buy groceries, he saw Tsubaki in the restaurant and immediately sat down next to him. He asked when Sakuya became his servant, and Tsubaki told the story of Sakuya's life. He was born into the most terrible family imaginable. They forced his sister to commit suicide for the sake of insurance, and young Saku was forced to lie to the police that she fell out of the window while playing with him, otherwise he would have suffered the same fate. This was the first time he lied, and then he continued to lie because of his parents. 6 years later, his parents threw him out of the window. Like his sister, while he was waiting for death, Baki saved him. He explains that servants satir when a dying man drinks the servant's blood and then becomes his servant. Tsubaki laughs at Mahiru, who doesn't even know this, and goes home before releasing his terrifying aura and saying that to date, he is not in the mood for violence. Mahiru, frozen in fear and couldn't even ask Tsubaki to return his Saku. He curses himself for not understanding what his friend is going through, because Sakuya always behaved as if it was all a joke. The next day, Mahiru rushes to school hoping that he will find Saku in class. He is not there, and everyone reacts strangely when they hear his name because they remember his character but not his face. Mahiru understands that Sakuya still wants his friends to remember him, but cannot tell everyone about himself. On the day of the cultural festival, Sakuya comes to school, wearing a mask. Although no one recognizes him, his friends pass by and he is surprised to see the inscription on their backs that they are waiting for him. While Sakuya thinks what to do, Kuro runs into him and knocks him down. Mahiru immediately runs up to him and Sakuya runs away to the roof. Unable to look him in the eyes, he tells Mahiru to leave him alone because he tried to kill him, and his friend Mahiru replies that he is lying because he actually tried to save him, and even Misona's wounds were not serious. They both run to the roof and Sakuya admits that he became friends with him only this year and all the memories that they were childhood friends were instilled in him by Mahiru, who says that it doesn't matter because he really was his friend. But Sakuya sprang from the roof so as not to meet him. Mahiru jumps after him. He grabs him by the collar and summons his flying broom. When they are almost landing, he tells Saku that it doesn't matter that he is a vampire because he is still his friend. After that he loses his balance and they both fall into the nearest forest. They laugh at Mahiru's strange abilities that he cannot control yet. But then Sakuya starts crying and says that he would like to live a little more in these happy moments. He tells Mahiru that when he was little and blamed himself for the death of his sister, Tsuba calmed him down and said that he was not to blame for anything. He promised that he would come for him when it was all over and kept his promise. He came to him when he was dying. Sakuya says that Tsubaki was the only one who helped him, and he didn't lie, so he will do anything for him. Mahiru understands that Tsubaki's influence on Saku was the same how his uncle's influence on him, and immediately tells his friend that he will stop Tsubaki. Sakuya thanks him but says that this is enough, he can no longer be with him. And with everyone else, I hit his fist on the palm of Mahiru disappears. He runs away from Mahiru remembering that he was the first who extended his hand to him. Friendship. Sakura cries thanks to Mahiru for being his friend and giving him a happy year in high school. Mahiru is upset because of his weakness. Kuro, who was hiding behind a tree, turns around and says that he wants to become stronger. Soon Mahiru receives a letter that is difficult for him to open and gives it to Kuro. But Kuro decides to tear the letter as soon as he sees the seal. The next day he takes Kuro to school and immediately becomes popular among the girls. On the way home, they end up at a night festival and decide to have fun while Mahiru and Kuro sit on the bridge and wait for the fireworks to start there. A man with an eye patch comes there. He gives Mahiru the suitcase and says that he can leave it in the lost and found department because he doesn't know where its owner is. As soon as Mahiru takes the suitcase, the suspicious man disappears, but Mahiru doesn't have anything in mind. He sends him to the lost and found department. On the way, he encounters a tall blonde man who is not on his shoulders. The coffin is not on his shoulders. Vampires. Mahiru has a hard time believing his words, but suddenly a loud explosion is heard behind them. People are screaming that it exploded. The silver suitcase remembers how a man with an eye patch pulled him to hand over the suitcase before the fireworks started. He is less than a minute and Mahiru thinks what to do with the suitcase. He doubts should he call Kuro to take the suitcase away because telling a crazy stranger that he is the owner of the servam is not a good idea, but he decides to trust Blondie. Well, calls Kuro. Mahiru gives him some blood. Kuro picks him up, hand flies up. He freezes the suitcase as high as he can and Mahiru panics because the suitcase might explode in the air. But then it falls to the ground. He jinxed himself because the suitcase actually fell to the ground and exploded, but then the blonde came to his aid. He catches the suitcase with his coffin and lets it explode inside. Mahiru and Kuro are shocked and ask the blonde who is he. He replies that his name is Tetsu and that he was in the coffin. Suddenly a trembling voice comes from the coffin. I ask her Tetsu how he could throw a bomb into the coffin when he himself was there. A burnt bat crawls out of the coffin and falls to the ground. Kuro immediately recognizes it as the worms. Due to his pride, Tetsu gave him the name Hugh and thanks to a small amount of blood, the worms felt better. He can't stop chatting and tells how he met Tetsu in a hotel near the hot springs and how the world plunged into chaos while Kuro wandered alone. Hugh says that today's explosion is definitely the work of Tsubaki and his minions. He tells Mahiru that they need to keep in touch and help each other in difficult times, but also warns that Tsubaki is not the only threat to them now. Later, when Mahiru and Kuro return home, the door suddenly opens and someone drags Mahiru inside. Leaving Kuro outside, Kuro realizes that there are some bad people behind this and they open again door and point a magic gun at him, and another guy in a straitjacket jumps on top of him. Mahiru is taken to a strange place where he is met by a scientist named Underscore. He says that they are at the headquarters of C3, a neutral organization between humans and vampires. He claims to be an ally of Mahiru and says that they brought him here to talk calmly. Yoki asks Mahiru to team up with them to stop Tsubaki, who poses a threat to both humans and vampires for now. Mahiru thinks that this is to sudden. Suki tries to convince him that they are on the same side and they have the same goal, so there shouldn't be any problems. He says that Kuro knows well of the three and can tell Mahiru everything he wants to know about them. Suki claims that they should work together to destroy all Tsubaki's henchmen. Mahiru replies that this is impossible because one of Tsubaki's successors is his friend, and he promised to save him. Suki did his research and knows about Saku. He tells Mahiru what to do with Tsubaki. This is a serious matter and his childish feelings not taken into account here. Mahiru refuses to work with boring adults like him. And the solution, however, when it comes to business, he's a real snake and says that there are 52 doors in this room, and only one leads to the exit. He tells Mahiru to hurry up and find it, otherwise he will never see his servant again, because right now Kuro is fighting with the most talented team of vampire hunters. Is E3. Mahiru runs to look for the exit, but the first door he enters takes him back to where he started. Kuki tells him that he will need a whole day to check all the doors, and by that time the vampire hunters will have taken Kuro far away from him. He says that if Sir Vamp and his master are further than a certain distance, the master will die. Therefore, Mahiru has only two options: either quickly find the right door or work CC3. He refuses to work with such abnormal people and continues to look for the right door, but cannot find it in any way. He understands that if he searches in all the doors, nothing will come of it, so he summons his broom and performs a crazy dance, which creates a tornado that destroys the roof of the building. And Tsuyuki tells Mahiru that he has found the right way out. He still warns him not to trust Kira because in the end that bloodthirsty vampire. Mahiru says that he too has seen the good side of vampires and they are his friends. Tsuyuki is speechless from his words and lets Mahiru go without resistance. Around the same time, Kuro is attacked by the men who were before. He barely manages to repel the Dark One's thorns flying out of the ground, but then a guy in a straitjacket rushes at him. Kuro dodges several blows, but gets hit in the face and flies to the side. They drive him into a corner and say that if he had come to them when they sent the letter, then everything would not have been so difficult. Kuro continues to run, dodges to the river. The guy in a straitjacket distracts him, saying that his master is under their control, and as soon as Kuro loses his vigilance, he is suddenly put in black shackles by the hunter. Already are about to finish him off, but then Mahiru appears on his broom and carries him away. A few days later, Mahiru, Misona and Tetsu meet at Tetsu's hotel. At the hotel, while Kuro and Snow enjoy a hot bath, Misona arranges for him a luxurious bed, and Tetsu is busy with work. Mahar is upset because no one is taking his strategy seriously. Later, he and Misana meet at the vending machine and discuss various things they don't know about Tsubaki. Mahara thinks that Master Serva out of envy might tell them something because he seems to be quite knowledgeable. Misana rejects his idea, claiming that they shouldn't trust this man and that they will handle it themselves. Later, Q brings fresh information about a dangerous man who is wandering around the city. Mahal and Kuro go in search of him and learn from henchmen that their target is a man in black clothes with a pair of wings on his back. They immediately notice him, and despite Kuro's warning that the man looks dangerous, Mahiru decides to follow him. He sees that the man is carrying a hedgehog in a cage, and the PTK activist with Mahiru wakes up and he decides to save the poor animal. He runs after the winged man, and as soon as he turns the corner he sees that the man is waiting for him. He asks if he is an angel or a demon, and Mahiru does not understand what he means. Then the man uses his power and suddenly calls the magic piano. He begins to play a melody from which Kuro's body gets heavier and he falls to his knees. The man declares that he is a demon and immediately rushes at him. He kicks Kuro aside and then kicks him higher and higher. Mahiru summons his broom and flies up to the roof where the strange man is about to trample Kuro. He stops attacking Kuro and allows him to drink his blood so that he can regain his strength. Mahira asks the man why he is hurting his partner and then asks him to let go of the poor hedgehog in the cage. The man obeys, and as soon as he opens the cage and the hedgehog turns into another servant who introduces himself as Lo, the servant of greed. He is very active and says that the man next to him is his master named Lit, who considers himself an angel who is irritated by his constant muttering, and he drives him away, declaring that he hates him because he is also a demon. Lo can't stop admiring his cruel master, whom Mahira continues to beat him. He is annoyed by their strange behavior, but he is glad that he found another ally in the fight against Tsubaki. Lo tells him that he is mistaken and that they are not his allies. Moreover, they don't even need allies because Kuro, the eldest of the vampires, can mend everything in an instant if he wants. He says that he has not forgiven him for what he did. When the 7 vampires gathered for the last time, Kira and Lo look at each other with a murderous look, and Mahiru understands that there is something between them, some kind of dark story. He separates them before introducing himself to Lo and asking him to help them. Lo refuses, glances at Mahiru and notices that his older brother's master is quite ordinary, and then runs away. Mahiru returns to the hot spring and is surprised to see Licht on TV. As a genius pianist from Europe, he tells everyone that he is the owner of a vampire servant who has already killed the boss. He says that the law kills his master when he gets tired of him, and that it is better not to mess with him. Despite in response to his warning, Mahiru goes to Licht's concert. He hides at the exit waiting for the security to get distracted to get inside, but a kind music lover notices him and decides to take him with him to the concert to show another program. On the way, Mahiru notices a man in an eye patch who gave him an explosive and realizes that Tsubaki is targeting Licht, so he runs into the hall where the concert is taking place. In the hall, the law is enjoying the performance of its owner when suddenly the whole audience attacks him. That's all Tsubaki's minions, and the law expected this. He alone fights with everyone, and by the time the hero enters a hall, there are only corpses left. He is amazed by the strength of the vampire and thinks that he has gone too far. Licht suddenly stops performing because people are talking, and the law asks him why he doesn't thank him for dealing with all the enemies. Licht just kicks him, but the law appears right behind him and kicks his wall. Mahiru is worried about him, but the law assures that the owner's servants are stronger than ordinary people. Then he asks Mahiru to stop trying to recruit him and let Kuro finish everything himself. Mahiru claims that Kuro can't handle it alone, and the law is annoyed. He lightly pushes him away and sends him to the other end of the hall, but Kuro behaves like a true Christian to save his master. Lo just laughs at them and then decides to tell Mahiru the backstory of the 7 servants. Long ago, there lived 7 vampire brothers who lived in peace and harmony until one day they did not receive a letter from an organization called C3. In the letter they were asked to kill a certain person, and 7 vampires decided to vote for answering this letter. Greed, gluttony and wrath were against, and pride, envy and lust were in favor of killing this person. Since the votes were divided equally, they turned to their older brother, the lazy vampire. Just at the moment when Lo was about to tell that he decided, Kuro was overcome by rage and a desire to kill. He releases his power. Lo laughs at him, asking how much he wants to hide his mistakes from his master. In response, he takes out the sword and the 2 servants begin to fight. On stage, Mahiru decides to figure it out himself and calls for his broom. He responds, Kuro, and a crazy look on his face takes him by surprise. Suddenly, Face comes to his senses after his wounds and stops the fight between Kuro and Lo by pinning Lo to the floor. He grabs the broom. Mahiru bends it and nails Kuro to the wall. He declares that they are all too destructive and the only thing they need now is to listen to his performance. Licht takes out his grand piano and begins to play a sad melody that brings up difficult memories in the listener and makes him cry. Mahiru remembers the moments spent with his mother and begins to cry. Wall growls on the floor because he sees the one he is desperately trying to forget. On the other side, Kuro freezes. His pupils dilate as the terrible memories that he tried to suppress come back to him. Lo can no longer to endure this, so he decides to attack Licht, who is ready to fight back. At this moment, the door opens and the man who brought Mahiru comes in. He sends a talisman in the form of a whale to defuse the situation, and Keith swims up to Law and licks his head to calm him down. Law is dissatisfied with the man in the whale costume, who is his subordinate. Mahiru rushes Kuro but sees that he has completely lost his mind. Suddenly, he hears his voice and turns around to see one of the surviving henchmen, Tsubaki. She apologizes and begs to let her go, but Lo decides to end her life. Mahiru stops him, saying that there is no need to kill someone who didn't even intend to fight. Lo surrenders because he still doesn't want to tie the bem to the character. He leaves and Mahiru approaches the man who introduced himself as the manager of Kraid. They decide to leave the henchman alive and Mahiru decides to take her to his friends for now. Kuro follows him, still immersed in darkness, Lo is trying to calm down by watching stupid videos on TikTok, when suddenly Tsubaki appears behind him. He gets scared when he sees her and Tsubaki smiles ominously and takes out a weapon. In the meantime, for all occasions, hello music low price. I put off my dream for so long until later. He says that this could lead to dangerous consequences. But at least he managed to capture one of Tsubaki's henchmen. Misona laughs to interrogate a captive named Lila because he doesn't trust her. When Mahara tries to argue with Misona, says that the girl can pretend to be weak, but in fact, she can be strong and dangerous. Tetsu and Hugh decide to interrogate her to find out where Tsubaki is finding Bob, but Mahiru stops them. He believes that if Tsubaki finds out that Lila is here, Miza will come here to save her. Has a hard time believing it. But Mahiru thinks that when he first met Tsubaki, he came to save the squirrels. In addition, he remembers how Sakuya respected Tsubaki and thinks that he will come. Mahiru asks Kuro to tell him what he thinks about this, but Kuro just leaves the hotel. Mahiru follows him and asks what's wrong with him. Kuro turns around, and one look from him is enough for Haru to understand that he is not himself. He understands that since Lo told the story of the past lazy vampire is not himself. He wants to ask him about what happened to Tsubaki and whether he agreed to kill the one they asked, but as soon as he begins to ask a question, he feels that Kuro dissolves and turns into something from his nightmares. Mahiru trembles with fear when the terrifying figure of Kuro looks at him. He gathers the courage to ask him to come back with him, and Kuro obeys. He turns into a cat and quietly follows Mahiru until later. Mahiru sits down chat with Lila Asam, who wants to know why Mahiru is so kind to him because he is his enemy. Mahiru replies that he doesn't consider Tsubaki his enemy. Alan thinks that he just needs to stop him. Lila thinks Mahiru is naive and says that although Tsubaki doesn't want to fight, he should be wary of Hyuga, who is Tsubaki's right hand and the strongest and most dangerous of them. The next day, Mahiru wakes up early and looks around to find Kuro, who is sleeping in a dark corner. Suddenly, Lich's manager calls him and asks if he has seen Lo. He tells Mahiru that Lo has not appeared since last night, and because of this, Lich is weakening every moment. Lich is also looking for Lo because only he can help him regain his strength. But then a middle-aged red-haired man appears right behind him. Lich realizes that he is dangerous and runs away, but not fast enough and gets hit on the head. The red-haired man is Hagen, Tsubaki's right hand, and he states that his boss is unhappy with what Lo did to his dear henchman last night. He says that in order to fix everything he will have to give Lich hell. Lich tries to fight back, but gets seriously injured from Hagen, who continues to fool around during the fight and even invites his opponent to fight. When Lich tries to attack him, while he snaps his fingers distractedly and the wound begins to burn with a red flame, with which he lights his cigarette. Then he tells Lich that his moat is now lying under Tsubaki's sandals. Our completely defeated face replies that he doesn't care about the god in the hedgehog, but he won't lose to some redhead. Hagen replies that he is sorry to kill such a talented pianist like him, and again releases red flames, creating a huge fire tornado. He is big enough for Maher to notice him from afar, and he wants to immediately go watch the fight. He tells Kuro to prepare for battle but asks him to call for reinforcements first. Mahou tells him that now is not the time. Lazy, and despite his hesitation, Kuro has no choice but to obey his master. They arrive on time when Hagen has almost finished off Lich. Mahou tells the redhead to move away from his friend, but as soon as he finds out that the redhead is that same scary guy named Hagen, he decides to fight him directly. He calls on Kuro to fight, but then Kuro is swallowed up by darkness and he loses contact with Maha. He begins to turn into a black liquid and soon all the darkness gathers into a black crystal ball. Maher does not understand what is happening and, raising the crystal ball with trembling hands, asks himself if this is Kuro. Hagen is also curious and he approaches Maher, who decides to summon his broom to defend himself. To his surprise, Bruno also enters the black crystal ball, leaving Hagen defenseless, but Lich comes between them, saying that their battle is not over yet. He uses the power of his magic boots to create a circle of piano keys around Hagen and walks into it to defeat him with his music. Hagen is impressed by his abilities and also decides to act seriously. He attacks Lich with flames and he responds by sending piano keys at him. While they fight with each other to the music and flames, Mahiru can only be stunned behind them. He feels like a useless clown who came to the rescue, but instead became a burden for Lit. Lit continues to talk to him in between fights and tells Mahiru that he should cast aside doubts and do what he wants. Soon the fight ends and Lit loses. Hagen picks him up and decides to take him alive to give to Subo, but then Mahiru runs up to him and asks him to let his friend go. Hagen suddenly appears next to him and flicks him on the forehead, which causes him to lose consciousness and remains in place. Only after Hagen leaves on the scene, Misona and Tetsu arrive on the scene. They are shocked to learn that Kuro has turned into a black ball, but their vampires feel his energy inside the ball. Mahiru blames himself for not listening to Kuro's advice and went without reinforcements, but Misona tells him that they still have. There was a chance he found a phone nearby, and judging by the keychain in the shape of a squirrel, that it belongs to one of Tsubaki's people. His guess is correct, and Tsubaki immediately calls him and says that this phone belongs to Hagen and he would like to return it. Misona replies that he will exchange it for Lo and Lika, whom he has now kidnapped. Tsubaki is surprised at his impudence and says that this is not an iPhone for which he is ready to pay so much. But Misena says that there is one of his henchmen hostage. He asks Tsubaki to return the hearts to him because of the greed of his owner without harming them, and then he will return the phone. And henchman Tsubaki just laughs at him and says that he will not harm these two, but he can separate them. He ends the conversation and thinks that he needs to change his plans a little. Mahiru and his friends immediately calling Lika Elo and unite them. In addition, Misona tells Mahiru that this time he will not come because without his weapon and servant he is useless. They leave the room to plan everything and Mahiru begins to play with the black ball, wondering what happened to Kuro. He realizes that all this time he was carried by Kuro and he needs to become stronger if he wants to help in any way. He begins to cry, apologizing to Kuro for putting all the hard work on him and not being able to help when he was having a hard time. Kuro suddenly replies from the crystal ball telling Mahira that he's had enough of his whining and complaining. He looks like a smaller copy inside the ball and says that he doesn't understand what's happening to him. I can't get out of the ball. Mahira promises to get him out at any cost, but Kuro says that there's no need to worry because he likes to be alone and not communicate with annoying people. Calls Mizun and Tetsu to show them what's inside the ball, but they don't see or hear him. Tetsu immediately comes up with a plan and decides cut the ball to get Kuro out. Mahira stops him, saying that it's wrong to treat his partner like that, but of course brute force won't help here. Soon a guest comes to the hotel and it turns out that it's manager Lika Kranz and the mascot Keith. He gets upset when he finds out that Lit and Lo were kidnapped by Tsubaki, and Mahiru apologizes because of him everything has only gotten worse. Kranz decides to join them in the rescue plan and says that Keith the mascot is great at fighting, and also he has a way to help them. He takes out a water pistol and sprays water on Hugh, who immediately passes out from the tap. Says that the gun is loaded with holy water and can greatly slow down vampires, and he often uses it to calm Lo when he is capricious. Mahiru asks where he got it from and he replies that he bought it from a strange antique dealer. It turns out that this is the owner of Saramago asking for help. Thoughts about Varya evoke in the middle terrible memories of how he was abandoned. He tells Mahiru that this man cannot be trusted. However, Snow manages to convince him that now they have no other choice. They part ways and Mahiru takes the train to get to the antique dealer's store when suddenly Tsubaki appears next to him in the form of a forest. Mahiru gets scared when Tsubaki says that his servant is not around. The black fox starts emitting black smoke and Mahiru jumps out of the moving train right in front, but it was all an illusion and Mahiru realizes it's only when he is lying on the platform he realizes that Tsubaki is already on his way and he needs to hurry up and get to the antique dealer. Soon Mahiru gets to his store, but as soon as he opens the door he is met by a mad scientist who melted the head of a Barbie doll and made juice out of it. Mahiru stepped back in shock. Mahiru asks the mad scientist about the antique and finds out that he has just left the store. Mahiru introduces himself, but the scientist pronounces his name incorrectly, although he remembers that Mahiru is the owner of the sloth vampire. He sits Mahiru on a chair and pours him a glass iced tea and then writes his name on his forehead so that he will not forget again. Then the madman introduces himself as Johann, a researcher specializing in vampires. Suddenly an antique dealer appears and punches Johann in the stomach for melting the head of his favorite doll. He then turns to Mahiru and invites him to his store. He introduces himself as Miku and thanks Mahiru for taking care of his little brother Masao. Mahiru is shocked to learn that Misan is actually Miku's brother, but now he understands his reaction before Mahiru can ask Miku what's going on. Johann grabs him and asks him to introduce him to the vampire sloths. Mahiru shows that Kuro has turned into a ball and Johann finds this very interesting. Mahiru approaches the mirror, which is actually a secret door leading to the mad scientist's secret laboratory, where Mahiru becomes his new test subject. He collects data about his height, weight, and health status, but Mahiru asks him to investigate Kuro and not himself. Miku asks what he is going to do when Kuro returns to normal. He wants to know if Mahiru will be able to kill Suba correctly. This time Mahiru asks why they use the word kill and not tear when it comes to vampires, and Miku explains that vampires are immortal, so they cannot be killed. However, the servants of vampires can be killed if their master drinks their blood. As for the servants, they appear when a person gives them a name and some object. Mahiru remembers that he gave Kuro a bell when he first met him in the form of a cat. Meika says that an object is what connects Mo to its owner, and if the object is destroyed, Mo can also be considered destroyed. Mahira says that he just wants to know how to return Kuro to normal because neither Meika nor Johann know anything about it. Mahira asks Yohino why he is so interested in vampires, and he begins his long monologue about how war contributed to progress in every era. He heard stories about how Kuro won every battle and wants him to use all his power to defeat Tsubaki. This time Mahiru says that he does not need Kuro's power, but he needs Kuro as a friend. Johann says that he is not interested in such sentimental things, but there is one thing that Mahiru can try to return Kuro to normal. He gives him a glass of tea, and as soon as Mahiru takes a sip he falls. Johann laughs and says that there was a medicine in the tea that allows the owner to directly penetrate the servant's mind. He tells Mahiru to deal with Kuro and then told him about the results of the experiment. Soon Mahiru finds himself in the dark and then sees Kuro's bell on the other side. Simon used his immense wealth to hire a geoguesser and determine the exact location of Tsubaki and his team, who were staying in a 5-star hotel. Misana thinks that the distance between the top and bottom floors of the hotel is large enough to Lit and Wall could not get close to each other. He also thinks that Tsubaki and Hagen are most likely guarding them there and decides to attack them. In the evening, when evening comes, Tsubaki calls him and tells him that they are on the 41st floor. Misana receives information about Tsubaki's movements from his henchmen, and Nisan and Tetsu disguise themselves and prepare to infiltrate the hotel. Kranz pretends to be rich tourists and approaches the administrator to find out that Tsubaki is most likely on the 41st floor. He gives Mina the key card for the room on this floor. Mina contacts Tetsu and tells him that it's time to move out while he takes the elevator. But then Sakuya Misona suddenly appears and is nervous that he will be found out. Despite his disguise, and he's right, Sakuya recognizes him and tells Misona that he pressed the button for the 41st floor but indicates that she is at the very bottom of Misona's list. Panics when he realizes that this is true, and then Sakuya presses the button emergency stop and the elevator stops. The elevator starts to fall and Misona takes off his mask because he realizes that now there is no point in it. He thinks that Lit and Walla have already been taken away from here, but then he realizes that this is not so because Sakuya would not stop them. Misona tells Tetsu to go up the stairs and he stays with Sakuya, just guarding one of the hostages from Tsubaki. The other Mizan wants to defeat them, although Snow is not very good at fighting, but when the elevator doors open he sees that there is no one in the basement. Suddenly Sakuya takes out a chainsaw and slowly pushes Mizan and Snow out of the elevator. He says that the plan that Misana and the others came up with was wrong from the very beginning because they didn't even understand how Tsubaki's brain works. He explains that they were bait from the very beginning and Tsubaki did not steal them to harm him. Instead he used them to lure Hugh, the pride of the clan, and destroy him. Sakuya attacks Mizan with a chainsaw and he can only dodge. He knows that winning in a fair fight will be difficult, so he begins to mock Sakuya. He says that Mahiru still considers him such a worthless friend, and he works for the crazy Tsubaki of his. The ridicule works and Sakuya shouts that no one understands Tsubaki's true motives. He claims that Tsubaki is looking for the key to something without knowing what. This true goal remains a mystery even to most of his henchmen, and Misan understands that Tsubaki is not striving for a regular war between vampires. Meanwhile, Hugh and Sue have reached the top floor where Hagen and Tsubaki's other henchmen have gathered. He believes that the hostages are somewhere nearby, and despite numerical superiority of the enemy, sure that they will win his father. Meanwhile, Tsubaki, following the call, comes into the forest and meets 5 guys in whale costumes there. The blue whale. The team mascot scolds Suba and demands that he return and obey them, otherwise he will kick his ass. Suba mocks him with a grumpy voice, which does not suit the cute mascot at all, and shows the keys that lead to the room of their servant and master. Then he asks where his minion, and blue whale replies that she is among these guys in suits. He leads Tsubaki to steal his keys, but he simply dodges him without attacking and jumps onto a tree because a thoughtless attack could accidentally injure his minion. Suddenly another whale uproots the tree on which Tsubaki is standing and tries to hit him. When he jumps away, the other whales also attack him, but Tsubaki is a slippery son of a and easily dodges all of them attack. He says that since there is a chance that his minion is here, he can't leave here. He tries to feel the blue whale, but the suit is too tight to understand if there are 2 people inside. Tsubaki laughs, saying that it's fun to play hide and seek with the whales in the forest, and then uses his power to make it rain again and grins sinisterly at the whales on the other side. Mahiru finds himself in the mind of Kuro, who looks like a dessert with red sand. He sees a creepy cat who gave him a weapon and asks where Kuro is. The scary cat tells him that Kuro doesn't want to see him, but Mahiru doesn't believe him. He concentrates, hears the ringing of a bell and follows the sound, circling around the room. Soon he falls face down and realizes that the sound of the bell is coming from under the sand. Mahiru decides show ingenuity and cuts through the sand to find an underwater staircase. He dives into the water and emerges on the other side. He goes down the stairs and soon finds himself in the room. As soon as the door opens, Mahiru is transported to Kuro's memory. This is a memory of a meeting in which the 7 vampires discussed whether they should take on the murder task that was given to them by the 3 vampires. Were divided into 2 factions. Some believed that it was necessary to kill the man who was the creator of the 7 vampires. Pride, envy and lust. They thought that he was too strong and dangerous to leave him alive. Gluttony, anger and greed. They believed that it was stupid to kill him because he didn't do anything bad, and the new year tasted better when he decided, and he declared that he would kill this man himself. Lo lost his composure and grabbed Kuro by the collar, asking if he would kill the man who was him like his father. Kuro told him not to say this word in his presence because he is not proud of how vampires like him were created. Mahiru is shocked by this and follows Kuro. When he goes hunting, he sees Kuro's memory of how he enters a traditional Japanese house and meets his creator. Suddenly black thorny vines grow from the ground and block Mahiru's view. He tries to free himself, but Kuro attacks his creator and the vines tightly squeeze Mahiru's eyes so that he begins to bleed. Kuro tells him that he does not want him to see the most shameful act in his life, and the scene quickly changes to the consequences of murder. While envy, lust and pride are happy that it's all over, gluttony and anger also believe that there is no better way to end this and bring peace to the world. They swear that they will not blame Kuro, but the law is the law. He swears that he will never forgive Kuro, who just leaves him. Mahir sees all this and shouts for Kuro to stop because this time he is ready to face him and accept his sin. Suddenly everything is immersed into the darkness, and when it dissipates, Mahira finds himself in a strange place full of sealed blocks. A creepy cat is unhappy that Mahira penetrates too deeply into Kuro's mind, but still asks him to satisfy his curiosity and reveal one of the secrets stored in these blocks. He offers him a powerful weapon to break through them, but Mahira says that he does not need it. He knows that Kuro is inside, and he just needs to knock to get to him. He knocks on the door and Kuro opens it for him. Mahiru opens the door and walks into a dark room, where he hears Kuro's regret after killing his creator. Soon he comes into the light and sees Kuro sitting still, doubting if he did the right thing. He wants someone to tell him that he was right, and Mahiru screams that he was wrong. The space around them begins to crack when he tells Kuro that if he still has doubts, then he did do wrong. After all, Mahiru says that you need to have the courage to admit your mistakes and move on, but they still have to do this. He hits Kuro with his head, saying that he does not have time to linger here. Mahiru extends his hand to him, saying that this time he is not alone and that together they will cope with his past and future. The white space around them disappears, giving way to a green meadow. Kuro accepts Mahiru's words and turns into a cat to again be in the hands of his owner. Meanwhile, on the top floor of the hotel, Licht and Lo come to their senses. They are tied up and wounded, and it turns out that they are in the neighboring rooms. Lo tells Licht that even someone as talented as him will die without achieving anything. He replies that he won't die and calls Lo an idiot without any ambitions. Lo continues to shout that he is nothing special, and then the wall suddenly breaks. Lo falls silent, and Licht asks him if he has lost the ability to argue. After facing him face to face, he says that it is his duty as an angel to kill a demon like him. He begins to release the power of his magic boots, and Lo just laughs, saying that he is as worthless as any other person. He also frees himself from his shackles and summons his sword to kill Licht and get rid of his annoying behavior. Licht also summons his magic piano, and a battle begins that shakes the entire building. Lo realizes that Licht is now in a worse state than him, so he decides to quickly end him. He rushes at him, but Licht successfully knocks his sword away again, and then steps on his face. But then he starts bleeding, and he immediately retreats. Lo thinks that now he will give up, but Licht does not give up. Servant is impressed and decides to give up. He says that they are both different people, but still minor characters in this world. Licht does not agree with him, and says that the only minor character in the whole world is Lo, who is too afraid to dream about something. He mocks him, calling him Seer Palm of Greed, because he doesn't do anything for which it would be worth trying. Licht rushes at him, but his words hurt Lo, and he releases all his power, enveloping him in darkness and saying that Licht knows nothing about him. Licht suddenly sees memories of Lo, which were a very long time ago. He used to be a serm-palm cheerful with the ass named Ophelia. Every moment spent with her was bliss for him. One day Ophelia told him that her engagement to the enemy prince was concluded for the sake of peace between the two kingdoms. He was devastated. She dreamed Ophelia told him that more than anything in the world she wanted peace and prosperity for her kingdom. So Lo could not do anything about it, and he saw how Ophelia married the prince, but the peace that this marriage brought was short-lived, and soon a war began between the two kingdoms. Aristocrats from Ophelia's kingdom decided to kill her, considering him a spy, who the Lo was in despair and went to warn Ophelia about this. He told her that this night was her last chance to escape, but she refused. She said that she wanted peace for both kingdoms and was ready to pay any price for it. The Lo could only cry when he said that he would kill everyone who wants to harm her, but Ophelia forbade him to do anything. The next day she was taken to the square for execution, and even there she called on the people of both countries to honor her sacrifice and strive for eternal peace. The Lo could only watch as the executioner's blade descended on her. He was a devastated world. One night, when he was mourning Ophelia, a pride servant came to him to report about the meeting that their older brother had called. At this meeting, Kuro decided that he would kill their creator. The Lo was not ready to accept the peace that would come after his death because the mental wounds that he received due to the sacrifice of Ophelia were still fresh. He was in despair when Kuro refused to listen to him and killed their creator anyway. After that he returned to the kingdom of Ophelia and discovered that a powerful enemy country had destroyed both kingdoms that it had so desperately tried to protect. The headless statue of Ophelia crumbled before his eyes, and since then the Lo had changed. He convinced himself that life was inherently meaningless and danced in the rain holding a fragment of the statue of Ophelia, which was the beginning of his villainous phase in the film Remembrance. And Lit is not impressed with what his vampire servant Lo wanted to show him. Stands next to him in the form of a yellow werewolf and claps his hands and cries when he sees a film based on his own memories. And Lit goes up on stage to give a truly unforgettable performance. He pulls back the curtain to show the piano and starts playing, and Lo says that he doesn't like it because it's a sad song. Face replies that it's not the song that's sad, but he himself is the Lo crying in his formless form, and finally understands that this is the power of imagination, and he perceives things the way he wants. He understands that he cannot give up the desire to protect Ophelia to the very end, and this saddens and scares him. The Lo curses himself for listening to Ophelia and asks why he could not figure out a way for him and Ophelia to get what they wanted. Finally, he understands that he still has goals that he wants to achieve at any cost. He wants Lick to survive this test, wants to meet Kuro face to face and asks why he killed their creator. He remembers Ophelia, then reaches out to her, destroying the illusion, freeing himself and Licht, who now work together. They break through the room, but Hagen comes to stop them. Licht tells Lo not to interfere because he wants to deal with the red-haired himself. Lo says that in this state it is impossible. They begin to fight, and Lo finally runs out of patience, so he decides to attack Hagen from behind. But Hagen dodges his attack and punches him in the face before setting him on fire. After they put out the fire, Lit and Lo attack their enemy again. Hagen decides to deal with the man first, but just as he is about to attack Lit, he uses his special power and switches places. Slow Hagen is surprised and taking advantage of the situation. Lit hits him with a strong blow and throws him to the wall. This does not cause much harm to the redhead, and he gets up to continue the fight, while Lit and Lo use their strategy to switch places at the same time to defend themselves, and decides to attack using all his powers against them. He takes off his gloves and suddenly attacks Lit, scratching his face. It doesn't light up and Lit is a little surprised, but Hagen lifts the blood from his hands and says that he is also a vampire. Suddenly, the building shakes from a powerful red explosion and Lit is thrown to the other end of the room. Hagen began to get younger and now he is ready to fight his enemies with full force. On the other side, Sakura is stalling for time so that Misana and Snow can escape. He throws knives at Mizan and almost hits him when he realizes that the watch that Snow wore around his neck is a gift from his master. To destroy the watch and defeat the servant, Sakuya bites his finger and turns his blood into a sword. He attacks Snow with the help of Hell, but he blocks his attack with his scythe. However, Sakuya takes out Tsubaki's sword, which can neutralize the power of the servant. He cuts Snow's side and then points the sword at Misana, but before he manages to hit him, and the bullet changes the direction of the sword. Mika saves his brother and tells him to go up to the second floor and help his friends. Mizo Na swears follows the advice and quietly leaves with Snow on the 41st floor. Tetsu fights with Tsubaki's henchman, using the coffin as a shield. He activates his special ability and summons a flock of bats, which Hyuga sends to enemies. He is satisfied with his work, but the guy in the eye patch suddenly attacks on him, distracting him and allowing Belchepin in his mysterious closet. Belchet at Hyuga disappear, leaving only a smoking pike. At this moment, Misana appears and asks Belchep sent Hyuga. Belchen finds out that Hagen went upstairs to fight a couple of dreams. He tries to figure out what happened but does not know how to change the situation. Squirrels attacks Tetsu, who blocks the blow with the Q pike, but then the string user ties his arms and legs so that he fell to his knees. Misona gets even more upset and is about to give the order to retreat when suddenly a shadow covers the room. Everyone looks out the window and sees how Mahiru comes in there riding a giant black lion. He enters the room and the giant black lion turns into Kuro, who all this time hid his true form because he was too lazy. Mahiru's friends hide behind him and talk about the situation. He tells them that there is nothing else to worry about and calls on his broom. He uses his power to turn the broom into a spear and rushes forward. The string user attacks him first with the help of his puppets, but Mahiru moves faster than she can and hits her in the back of the head, instantly knocking out the squirrels, and the guy in the eye patch begin a joint attack and the chicken decides to stop them. He summons wings of black energy and creates sharp spikes from them. Mahiru jumps right behind him and hits the spikes with a broom, piercing the enemies. At the top, Hagen has already defeated Lo and Face and decides to go downstairs to fight Mahiru. Lo still can't believe it because he saw Kuro's true form before and wonders if Mahiru helped him regain his confidence. He doesn't want to be left behind, so he attacks, who just kicks him in the stomach and steps on him. He tells Lo to lick his boots, and then maybe he lines think about leaving him alive. Lit right there orders Lo not to retreat and tells Hagen to lick his shoes, but immediately retreats, realizing that this is too disgusting. But Hagen just laughs at him. He says that he is tired of killing thoughtlessly, but since Tatsuki wants this, he will do it. Face draws 3 connected rectangles on his hand and tells him to stop hiding behind other people to justify his actions. He clicks on a rectangle and Hagen suddenly feels his whole body vibrating to the beat of the music. He understands that Face used his blood to turn his body into a tool and releases red flames that engulf the entire room. Of Face quickly summons his magic piano and asks Lo to help him. The server realizes that he must do something big to match his ambitious and cool master, so he extinguishes Hagen's flame and puts him into a trance. He transports Hagen to the theater in his mind, where he challenges him to a one-on-one duel. Hagen rushes at him and dodges the first attack with the sword, but suddenly the sword turns into thousands of spikes that pierce him everywhere. Lo reminds him that he is a hedgehog after all, and when Hagen falls to the ground, they return to the real world. Lo and Lit fall to the ground completely exhausted, and the others come into the room to save them, but Lit gets up and confidently says that an angel like him doesn't need help. He immediately falls and Mahiru supports him. As he takes him down, he thinks that their group managed to complete the mission to save Lit and Lo, and that now he is missing then. Mahira asks where the lilac is and Tetsu opens the coffin revealing that she was hidden inside them, tricked Tsubaki into believing that she was among the whale mascots. Mahira asks Kuro to deal with his brother and he goes up to Lo to thank him. Kuro says that Lo was the only one who never forgave him, and that's why he was able to admit his mistakes. Lo is embarrassed and relieved to hear this and thanks Mahira for helping him. Everyone starts to get along well and then Lilac snatches the Yulo belt sign that Face gave him. She says that Lonnie deserves to be happy because he killed all her friends and she will avenge them by breaking his. Mahira remembers that Miku told him that if you destroy the item that the owner gave them, then they will break. He asks Lilac not to do hasty actions, but she says that despite his kindness she is still loyal to her dead friends and will destroy the necklace to avenge them. Suddenly Tsubaki appears behind her. He is glad that the lilac is safe and asks her to give it back, a necklace for him. He is very surprised to learn that Lo and his owner defeated Hagen and even Kuro returned to his original appearance. That this is exactly what he wanted. Tsubaki throws the nameplate and goes to the window. Lake wants to fight him, but Lo doesn't let him do it because before he couldn't defeat Tsubaki, and now they are both already at the limit. He asks Kuro to win instead of him, and he agrees. Tetsu suddenly asks what happened to Hugh and Tsubaki shows him exactly the same mysterious box as the one with which Belchia made him disappear. He says that Belchip Vilku came to him, and he finished him off in the forest. Mahiru asks what he wants to achieve and Tsubaki answers that he wants to impress his teacher. Having cleaned up the mess after himself, he goes to Mahiru and red petals fall from his sleeve. Then they take the shape of a hand. Suba says that he is the only one in the world who can kill Serb. He scatters petals and summons his sword and then throws Lo's nameplate into the air. He cuts it and Lo in one motion and they explode. Under high pressure Tsubaki calls for another sword, but Kuro knocks it out of his hands and grabs it. They fight, and Tsubaki asks Kuro to step aside and let him finish. Lo Kuro says that he finally recognized him as a vampire and his little brother because no one except their creator could. Music Go says their creator would also be his teacher, who now he wants to take revenge on him. He disarms the dog, shouts at him asking if the teacher said anything or he just didn't hear anything. Meanwhile the fog in the room thickens and Lit realizes that Lo has turned into Ism. Ahara tells Masana and Tetsu to come down, and he goes forward to join the battle along with his servant. Kuro admits that he was wrong by killing his creator, but now he can't stop and must stop the madness. Tsubaki he takes out the sword and says that they must solve everything with words and not force. That the sword wounds his hand and Tsubaki says that his words mean nothing here. Kuro suddenly sees how his creators Tsubaki merge into one and says that he must become just like them. Tsubaki laughs and says that he will destroy this imperfect world and absorbs all the fog that comes from Lo's body. He uses the power that he received from the fog and turns it into rain of red magic blades, which falls on the city and laughs like crazy. Kira approaches to him, deciding to settle everything by talking. Tsubaki points his swords at him, but Kira reflects then and touches his shoulder. Tsubaki pierces him with her magic swords, but Kira does not let him go. He wants to talk about what he did wrong and what Tsubaki is doing wrong now. Tsubaki is amazed by his determination and asks why their creator did not tell the 7 brothers and sisters about his existence, even in the last minutes of his life. He attacks Kira, cuts off his hand, but then Mahir appears and blocks his sword. Tsubaki pulls out a blade that pierced Kira and wounds Mahir in the face. Kira is furious and when Tsubaki tries to attack his master again, he turns into a giant black lion and destroys the building. Tsubaki continues to attack Kuro with his red blades, but he simply deflects them. Then Kuro steps on him, and Tsubaki laughingly asks if he also killed their creator. He begins angry. Mahiru tells him that he should not kill Tsubaki at any cost and sees this as a chance. He controls his sword and points it at Mahiru, but suddenly Sakui appears in front of him and takes the blow to protect his friend. He tells Mahiru that he couldn't choose a side until the end and Tsubaki laughs at him. This time Kuro definitely wants to kill him, but Mahiru stops him again. He stands between Kuro and Tsubaki and suddenly Tsubaki's body starts to resonate with him. A breeze opens in his heart and in response to this, Mahiru's broom turns into a key. He plunges the key into Tsubaki's heart because this is the simplest logical way out and opens the door to some forbidden memories. Mahiru will see Tsubaki's life story starting from the deaths of his parents and ending with his rebirth into a vampire and his doubts that his older brothers and sisters will accept him. He respected and adored his creator and was devastated. Mahiru understands the reason for his actions, but Tsubaki notices him in his memories and attacks. They come out of the memories. At that very moment, Makura stops Tsubaki's attack, not allowing him to get to Mahiru. Makura feeds Kuro with his blood, giving him strength, and they rush at Tsubaki, reflecting his red blades, and then, instead of attacking Tsubaki, Mahiru simply hugs him. Tsubaki cannot understand this and loses the desire to fight, and his red ones the blades disappear a few moments later. Mahiru joins his friends in the evacuation center and Tsubaki heals the wounded Saku using his power on the roof of a nearby building. He asks Saku to fulfill his last request to tell all the henchmen to forget about him and live their lives. He smiles and says that he has personal matters to take care of. Soon everyone returns to normal life. Tetsu continues to work in his hotel. Lit recovers from Misona's injuries, meets with his father. Tsubaki's henchmen are in prison.